Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The presentation will begin shortly. First, I have a few housekeeping items I'd like to call to your attention before we begin. First, please note this event is being recorded and will be distributed to registrants and made publicly available within 1 week after the live event. Questions can be submitted at any time throughout the event through the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar. For technical support questions related to Zoom, please visit support.zoom.us. ASL interpreters are available to pin, or you can click the interpretation button on your Zoom toolbar and select ASL to populate the interpreter in a separate window. Closed captioning is also available through the Zoom toolbar. I'd also like to call your attention to this disclaimer. As noted previously, the presentation is being recorded and a link to the recording will be sent to you, along with a link to the materials and an evaluation survey within 1 week. We ask you not to make your own recording or otherwise reproduce this presentation. Also note that the information provided in this presentation is general in nature. You should rely on your institution's appointed vice president liaison and other Middle States staff members for specific information that is relevant to your institution. Today's presentation is Meet Middle States, Student-Centered Accreditation Built for Innovation, Quality, and Global Impact. We'll start with some introductions, so I'll hand it over to Ryan to get us started.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and I should say good morning and good evening to many of our institutions who are joining us from abroad. My name is Ryan Hartnett, and I am the Vice President for Membership with Middle States. And in my role, I help support our applicant and candidate institutions.
And my name is Krista Edwards Owens. I am the administrative coordinator for our membership, so thank you all for being here. I support all of the work that Ryan does with our applicant candidate institutions and all of the administrative work that goes along with Ryan's hard work. As a reminder, questions can be submitted through the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar. The objectives for today's webinar are to understand Middle States' unique approach to accreditation, explore Middle States' peer review process and institutional growth, examine the benefits of Middle States accreditation, and to review accreditation pathways. Now, I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Ryan.
All right, thank you so much, Krista. So let's start by talking about why accreditation matters and matters so much right now. We've seen rapid innovation in higher education from 100% online institutions, AI integration, alternative credentials, degrees in threes. All of our institutions are evolving quickly. Accreditation ensures that innovation enhances quality rather than compromises it. Public accountability and trust. Higher education trust is no longer assumed. It must be demonstrated. In an era of heightened scrutiny, accreditation demonstrates that institutions meet rigorous standards and are committed to transparency and responsible stewardship. Students, families, policymakers, employers, they expect transparency and evidence of impact. Accreditation provides an independent validation of institutional integrity and outcomes. And then there's student success. Accreditation keeps the focus where it belongs on student learning outcomes, retention, completion, and post-graduation success. And finally, for global mobility and partnerships. For institutions operating internationally or those that serve international students, accreditation strengthens credibility and supports mobility across borders. So, what is Middle States exactly? Middle States is part of a regulatory triad working with the U.S. Department of Education as well as our states. Middle States is joined by other accrediting agencies in partnering to do the work of accreditation. We also work with international, local municipalities and governance when we are working with our international schools as well. Like your institutions, the commission also has a mission, vision, and values. Our mission is to promote educational excellence through innovation across diverse institutions. And you're going to see in a couple more slides just how diverse our institutions truly are. Our vision is to be a prominent voice and champion in higher education, to leverage accreditation for our membership institutions and students. And you will know, if you're familiar with Middle States, you'll know that we do a lot of advocacy on behalf of our institutions. Our values include protecting the future, guiding for good, and setting the standard. So, what you see here are our commissioners. The commission is comprised of 27 commissioners. Commissioners are nominated and elected by our institutional members in accordance with the commission's process, our election processes. Now, these folks you see here, they're volunteers and they dedicate a great deal of their time to the good of our institutions. They are public representatives. We have presidents, provosts, professors, staff members at our colleges and universities, and they're all doing the hard work making sure that our institutions are meeting our standards and that our commission is running smoothly. You'll see kind of a breakdown of who is the commission, and you'll see the commissioners already represented in that bottom right quadrant. All institutions that are accredited by Middle States and all institutions that have been granted candidate for accreditation status and are in good standing are considered institutional members of Middle States. So that's where the member institutions fit in. Peer evaluators provide a vital service to our organization. Our peer evaluators come from our colleges and universities. They're competent and knowledgeable individuals qualified by education and experience, and they're trained by us on their responsibility as appropriate to their roles. And they undergo training on our standards, policies, and procedures to conduct on-site visits. And then finally, you have our commission staff, which includes Krista and and I think roughly about 38 of us who work for the commission, all of whom work remotely. You see our member institutions. This was of January 2025. We have over 500 member institutions, and you'll see we include our candidates here. And I'll just pass along some good news that we're at roughly 512 total institutions as of today. So we've seen some recent growth in our institutions. Our membership by Carnegie classification, we break it down here for you. If you can see this, you'll see that indeed we have 4-year institutions, 2-year institutions, exclusively graduate. We also have a great number of public universities and colleges and community colleges, private non-for-profit institutions, and private for-profit institutions as part of our membership. We have a global footprint. Middle States accredits institutions in 46 states, 2 territories, the District of Columbia, and 97 countries. And you'll see our representation across the United States. Many of our institutions have additional locations and branch campuses in other states and in other countries. And then we have institutions that are wholly located outside of the United States that are members of our commission. You undergo an accreditation review cycle and monitoring for institutions who are seeking a grant of accreditation or reaffirmation. This is basically an 8-year review cycle for our member institutions. And it all starts with self-study evaluation, which includes a great deal of inquiry and analysis, thinking about our own institutions and our standards. That then goes to a self-study evaluation, which is a visit by a visiting team. But in the meantime, we have a lot of ongoing monitoring activities. You know, when we're not on campuses, we're thinking about our institutions, collecting data. Sometimes we request follow-up reports, supplemental information reports. But that monitoring is oh so important so that we can be in constant contact with our schools. Anytime we make a decision here, you'll see a multi-level accreditation decision-making process. So our teams will visit your institutions. They may have findings like collegial advice, commendations, recommendations, requirements. Those then always go to a next level of review. Our committee review is composed of commissioners and staff members. Our team chairs in our evaluation committee are invited to present on the institutions. And then the committee then takes those recommendations from the visit and findings, kind of, and puts some language behind them and sends them to the full commission for action. We have our expectations for accreditation include requirements of affiliation, standards for accreditation, which we'll talk about, our federal compliance requirements in keeping with us as a USDE recognized accreditor, and then our own policies and procedures, which we also reinforce in our standards. You can find our standards on our website, the Standards for Accreditation and Requirements of Affiliation, the 14th edition, as well as the Evidence Expectations by Standards Guide. You can find those on our website. The standards for accreditation provide a comprehensive framework for institutional excellence. They focus on mission and goals, ethics and integrity, design and delivery of the student learning experience, support of the student experience, assessment of educational effectiveness, planning, resources and institutional improvement, governance, leadership and administration, and of course, compliance with federal requirements. Together, these standards ensure that our institutions are mission-driven, student-centered, fiscally responsible, and committed to continuous improvement. These standards are not just checkpoints, they form an integrated framework that connects strategy, student learning, and institutional accountability. You'll see on the screen here requirements of affiliation. We have 4 requirements of affiliation. You must be authorized to operate. That's within your state or within your country. You must be operational with students actively enrolled in a degree granting program. So many of our institutions have non-credit programs. Those are included within their scope of accreditation, but all institutions must have students actively enrolled in a degree granting program. For our member institutions, they must have graduated at least 1 class. And as you'll learn, institutions that are coming through, especially brand new ones, they may not have graduated a class yet. But that's okay. We will get you there. And then, of course, you need to communicate with us in English. Now, it is fine however you want to communicate on your own campus in any language you like. But your materials that are submitted to the commission would all be done in English. And our visits and our evaluators conduct their interviews in English as well. It's important, very important to note that our standards are under review. And in fact, our standards have been under review many times, and we are excited about the 15th edition of our standards that we're currently working on. We are, as you see from the timeline, we're somewhere between our public call for comments and our commission consideration. We will soon take a membership vote and then a commission vote. And the goal is to launch our new standards July 1, 2026, which is very exciting. You can see the website there, go.msche.org/standards-review. You can check out what folks are thinking about in terms of the new standards and how we're going to make the standards even more streamlined and easier to work with in the coming years ahead. We have policies, procedures, guidelines, templates, and everything you need on our website. You're also going to find statements of accreditation status attached to each of our institutions on public-facing pages, so you can get information about commission action related to institutions, all there on the website. We also have an evaluator resource page for our peer evaluators, which is a great resource for those that are on our visits and doing peer evaluation for us. All right, so let's get to the benefits of Middle States accreditation. And there are many benefits to what we do and how we work with our institutions. First of all, public trust and credibility. And I know I spoke about that a moment ago with the why accreditation question. But accreditation truly signals that an institution meets rigorous, peer-reviewed standards of quality and integrity. It reassures students, families, policymakers, and the public that an institution delivers on its promises. And as I mentioned before, we're at a point in higher education where that public trust, this is a conversation. So accreditation is committed to making sure that our institutions are trusted and they're viewed as credible. Accreditation also provides access to federal financial aid or Title IV. Recognition by an institutional accreditor is required for participation in Title IV programs. Accreditation, therefore, directly supports student access through financial aid and institutional financial sustainability, for whom many of our institutions would not be financially sustainable without this aid. We also have here as a benefit employer and transfer confidence. Accreditation provides employers confidence in the quality of graduates and facilities and facilitates credit transfer and articulation agreements, supporting student mobility and workforce readiness. And then there's continuous institutional improvement, which I think is the most important benefit of all of Middle States accreditation. The accreditation process is built around evidence, assessment, and reflection. Our institutions undergo deep inquiry and analysis through the evaluation period. It fosters a culture of ongoing improvement. Rather than episodic compliance, we are interested in fostering cultures on our campus, on our campuses that are thinking about continuous improvement. We support innovation. Accreditation does not inhibit innovation, and specifically Middle States accreditation. We provide a framework to evaluate new programs, new delivery models, partnerships, whether you're working with third parties or other institutions, whether you're running a fully online program, whether you're operating within the US or abroad, we support your innovation. We also, the accreditation for Middle States also will strengthen your strategic engagement, planning, and governance. The standards, the way that we frame them, and the way they will continue to be framed, connect mission, strategy, resource allocation, and governance. They help ensure that leadership decisions are aligned with institutional priorities and student success, and that our resource allocation is really truly following our institutional plans and ideas. And finally, we align mission and institutional priorities and outcomes. Accreditation requires institutions to clearly define their mission and demonstrate their programs, resources, and outcomes. It creates coherence across planning, operations, and results. So I'll move on to the benefits of Middle States accreditation for international institutions. And I'll note we got a lot of questions leading up to this webinar about this very thing. Middle States accreditation provides internationally recognized validation of institutional quality. Because Middle States is recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, it signals to students, governments, and partners that your institution indeed meets rigorous, peer-reviewed standards grounded in accountability, student learning, and institutional effectiveness. This recognition directly supports student mobility. Accredited institutions make it easier for students to transfer credits, pursue graduate study abroad, and have their credentials understood and respected across borders. I'd also like to mention this transfers to faculty and to other folks on your campus as well. I remember I was a dean about 15 years ago. I hired my first faculty member, and they were coming from India to teach English literature. Well, at that time, they provided what was a thick packet of information to prove that their degree was real, to live and work here in the United States. With Middle States accreditation, you will make that much easier on your graduates when they're seeking jobs, going abroad, and going other places. Middle States accreditation also strengthens international partnerships, and I have seen this in action. It builds confidence among potential collaborators, whether for dual degrees, research initiatives, branch campuses, or articulation agreements. By demonstrating shared standards of governance, academic quality, and institutional integrity, our institutions know that they can collaborate. For all the international institutions I've worked with, Middle States accreditation is not just a credential. It is a strategic asset that enhances global reputation, partnership opportunities, and student success. So let's talk about the Middle States difference, okay? Because we are different than our peers. We provide commission staff support. You will benefit from experienced, accessible commission staff who serve as partners throughout the accreditation journey. This relationship with our vice presidents and our staff members is proactive and consultative. It is a guiding relationship. It is not distant or nor transactional. I like to say that I am not your gatekeeper, I am your partner, and I'm here to help you through this process. We are well known for our responsiveness, our clarity, and our engagement. Our institutions consistently note that the individualized guidance and open communication that we provide helps them to navigate complex questions and strategic changes. Our vice presidents are only a phone call away, and they are here to support your institution. Middle States is highly student-centered and mission-driven. At its core, our accreditation is grounded in student learning and institutional mission. The standards are there to ensure that decisions, resources, and strategy ultimately serve our institution's missions and serve student success. And we have such a diversity of institutional missions and institutions. You'll often hear our staff say, our standards are not prescriptive. We want to support what you are doing. And each institution can support and meet our standards in their own unique ways. Middle States accredits a wide range of schools, as we mentioned, public, private, large and small, domestic and international. I have worked with schools with less than 30 or even a handful of students, 20 seminarians at an institution. We accredit private, four-year kind of traditional liberal arts institutions, entire university systems like the State University of New York. Um, that diversity of schools, it enriches our peer review process and fosters a dynamic, engaged community of practice. So you're not going to get just one type of school in our membership. Our accreditation is focused on mission. Middle States does not impose a one-size-fits-all model. Our schools are always evaluated in light of their own clearly articulated mission and goals. We also have what I like to call a peer-led quality assurance process. This accreditation process is driven by peers. I mentioned before the commissioners. They are all volunteer members. They come from our colleges and universities, many of them. Our evaluators are experienced leaders and practitioners who understand our institutional realities because they live it every day themselves. Our reviews are rigorous, but they're grounded in professional respect and a shared commitment to improvement. Middle States is also different in its advocacy. We advocate for Middle States institutions. We actively represent and support our schools in national and international conversations, whether that's with the U.S. Department of Education or MSCHE. We are there at the negotiating table advocating for our institutions about education policy and quality assurance. And then finally, also compared to our peers, we have a much more extensive global impact and opportunity. With an expanding international footprint, Middle States offers our institutions opportunities for global visibility, collaboration, and recognition, strengthening their reputation and engagement across borders. So we have pathways to accreditation with Middle States. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how we get accredited with Middle States. So our traditional or historical application and candidacy review cycle still in place for our new institutions. Any institution that's brand new, startup schools, schools that are just forming. Sometimes we have schools that are kind of birthed out of other institutions. They kind of separate themselves. They want to become a new school. And then, of course, this category also includes our international institutions, schools that are coming to us from abroad, as well as US based institutions that do not currently have USDE recognized accreditation. The second pathway is an addition of or change of primary accredited middle states. And this is for institutions that already hold accreditation from another U.S. Department of Education recognized accreditor that is similar in scope to us. For those institutions coming to us from other USDE accreditors, and I know we have a few of them here today, that process, as you will see in the slides coming up, is much quicker. We can move our institutions much more quickly if they already hold USDE education recognized accreditation similar in scope to ours. So let's go over the application candidacy review cycle. So this is again, this is sort of our typical cycle for brand new institutions that are coming through. This would include new institutions, international schools, and those without USD recognized accreditation currently. There's a pre-application process of 4 to 6 months, candidate readiness 4 to 9 months, and then membership as candidate for roughly 24 months. And note, when you get past candidate readiness, so as early as 8 to 15 months, you will become a member of Middle States through this process. And we are committed to moving this process along efficiently. And we are moving as quickly as you want to move because I know our institutions are eager. And then finally, our institutions enter into an ongoing process of accreditation and reaffirmation. And we're going to go through these phases individually in a moment, but this just provides a rough overarching sketch of the timeline. So that pre-application phase, as I mentioned, is 4 to 6 months, and institutions must meet minimum eligibility requirements for membership through submission of evidence. The institution, once it submits its evidence, is now considered a pre-applicant. We then conduct an evaluation visit, which is a two-person team. A team chair and a document reviewer are assigned to the review, and a team chair and me, the vice president for membership, attend your visit. So I am there to help support the institution, make sure that the process is being done well. I'm also there to support the team. That pre-application will then go to commission action much quicker than other steps because our commission is dedicated to meeting as an executive committee every other month to approve our pre-applications, among other things that they do. So we move these institutions through pre-application, as you can see, very fast, and sometimes even faster than 4 to 6 months. You'll see here our pre-applicant minimum requirements for eligibility. And this is an important slide for those of you who are new or international and you're coming in. We need to see that you have proper legal authorization, that you're licensed to operate as a post-secondary institution, whether that's in Mexico or Peru or Kuwait or one of the many other places our institutions are coming from. We need to know that you have legal authorization to operate where you are, and that includes here in the United States within our states. You have to have good standing with your state authorizing agencies or other USDE recognized accreditors. That's a really important piece too. So you can't have a current adverse action against your institution. We want to make sure that institutions are coming to us voluntarily, right? And the U.S. Department of Education is very interested in that as well. So we're making sure that our schools are not kind of escaping trouble to come to us, but that they are in good standing. Student institution, very importantly, has to be operational with students enrolled in degree programs. So we've got to get our institutions started. They've got to start to bring in students as they're coming in for pre-application. We'll also look at your mission and goals. We will look at your governance structure. And the governance structures are wildly varied, but there are some guidelines that we use and when we talk to our institutions about institutional governance that need to be met. We're also going to be looking closely at your financial resources and then required disclosures and a certification statement for any related entities. So if you have an ownership structure where you have a single owner, we'll need to know about that, or if you're owned by a corporation, or if your ownership owns other colleges and universities, we'll need to know about those as well. The next step of the process is candidate readiness, which is a roughly 4 to 9 month process. Once approved in the last commission action, you are now considered an applicant institution, and the institution will submit a candidate readiness report. And that readiness report is a showing that an institution is ready to meet our rigorous standards and our requirements of affiliation. This also involves another evaluation visit. We'll send a team, a 3-person team of peer evaluators. Once again, I will accompany these peer evaluators on the visit to make sure that things are done correctly. They will then provide an oral report. That oral report will contain collegial advice, commendations, recommendations, requirements. Once that report is submitted, the institution, you will have an opportunity to respond to the report, and then the team chair will provide a confidential brief. All of that is then submitted to our committee. And remember, I said we have a multi-level accreditation process. Well, here you see it playing out once again. They would be going to our committee on applicant and candidate institutions, and then it goes to our commission action, which currently meets our commission, our full commission meets 3 times a year. So you'll see that 4 to 9 months gives us a little bit of leeway, but we will get you to the next commission meeting, either November, March, or June, to approve your candidacy. Next, you are a member as a candidate, and that's a roughly 24 months. And that time period is a little bit more prescribed because as a candidate institution, you're going to enter into a self-study evaluation review cycle like all of our member schools. So now you're basically acting as a member institution. You will go through a self-study institute. That self-study institute currently is a 5 week online virtual institute where you work with our staff and our vice presidents. You get to hear from other representatives from colleges and universities. We have plenary sessions, but we make it easy. You stay at home, you do it all online, and you learn more and more about our accreditation, about our standards, and what's required in these evaluation visits. Institution then submits a self-study design. It's kind of like a plan or a blueprint for what they're going to do. Um, Next slide. And then there will be a self-study preparation visit by one of our vice presidents or myself. Will come out to your campus and prepare you. So you kind of get the idea here. There's a lot of engagement from our staff and vice presidents along the way as we're trying to support you through these processes. You'll then have a team chair visit and an evaluation visit. The team chair visits 1 semester ahead of the evaluation. And then an evaluation team, they consist of 6 to 8 peer evaluators who come to your campus. They will read through your full self-study, which at this point will be a 100-page single-space document with thousands of pages of documentation, all these things that your campus has busily put together, and they will provide their readout and their evaluation of your materials. Once again, it's a 3 part process. It goes to our committee on evaluation reports and then up to our full commission. And again, that process takes roughly 24 months. Next slide. Once you are accredited, your date of accreditation will actually go back to the day you've become a member. So it is retroactive to the date of membership. So truly, you can get to be a member, as I mentioned before, in a very short period of time. You will work through your self-study evaluation cycle. You become accredited, but your date of accreditation will go back to the date you became a candidate. Institutions will then enter what is an 8 year accreditation review cycle and monitoring period. And I showed you that on a previous slide. So institutions are going to be then coming back for self-study every 8 years. And I'll just note, a number of our competitors have moved to other cycle formats, but what we have done is we've moved away from a 10-year with a 5-year midpoint review. We have eliminated the midpoint review, and so that we only come and evaluate you every 8 years. And you'll see that some of the other accreditors, they're still on that 5-year, 10-year cycle. So you end up going through an evaluation cycle truly every 5 years. So we've wanted to ease the administrative burden on our institutions, and this is just one of the many ways we have done that. And of course, as I mentioned before, there's continuous monitoring of our institutions, making sure that our institutions are healthy financially, that our students are being well served. So we do review media reports and various other things that are out there, actions taken by other creditors, and we often will call and just say, "Hey, we just want to have a little bit more information about this." And I have found in those conversations, my institutions, they have been really encouraged by that because they want to be seen, and even when they're dealing with some trouble, they want to know that somebody's out there, somebody's thinking about them and looking out for them. So then we come to the addition or change of primary creditor. And as I mentioned before, this is the expedited process. So choosing to add or change your primary accredited to Middle States, I want to make sure that this is a strategic decision, not an administrative one. And it's not a decision that any institution undergoes lightly. Um, First, Middle States student-centered, outcomes-focused standards. We provide a clear, integrated framework. And as I mentioned before, we connect mission, strategy, resource allocation. And our institutions often find that our standards really sharpen their institutional focus and strengthen their cross-campus alignment compared to the accreditors they're coming from. Our peer review model brings experienced institutional leaders and subject matter experts to this process. This review is quick, but it is rigorous, but it's also collegial. And like all of our reviews, it's improvement oriented. So you're going to come through this pre-application process, just as I showed you on some previous slides, and we're going to look at your minimum eligibility requirements and assess your eligibility and readiness. But in a very short period of time, you will go from a pre-applicant institution to an accredited institution. And again, provided that you already have a USDE recognized accreditation similar in scope to ours. Once you become accredited, you will then enter into a four-year accreditation review cycle for your initial cycle. And the idea for that is we're bringing you into Middle States from your previous accreditor, but we want to get you to self-study so that you can demonstrate to yourselves and to the world, that you are meant to be here, that you can do the work of self-study and evaluation. We support you throughout that 4-year cycle. There are stages along the way. We send out a team in year one, for example, that will look at specific standards related to academics and assessment. And that team is really there just to provide you feedback and to get that feedback and incorporate that feedback into your self-study. So we build you up in this iterative process for 4 years as you move from being accredited to having your accreditation reaffirmed through self-study for the first time. Once you've completed that initial 4-year accreditation review cycle and monitoring phase, you then would enter the 8-year phase for all of our schools. I want to just mention, for institutions that are considering a change of primary accreditor, we offer a continuity of federal recognition, strong national and international credibility, a transparent and structured transition process, and ultimately adding or transitioning to the Middle States should enhance your institutional reputation, clarify your strategic priorities, and position your institution for long-term sustainability and global engagement. And then I would like to move on to questions. I know we've gotten some questions ahead of time. We've got a number of questions in our chat. So, um, Crystal, what kind of questions are we being asked today? Let's see what we got.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. You very clearly laid out some information because we've had some really good questions come in here. So
All right, great.
the first question regarding global footprint, how are institutions advised to know, understand, and comply with varying country legal requirements?
Yeah, so it is the onus is on the institution to understand what are the requirements of their municipality, whether that's national or international. And we investigate that as well. Our institutions, when they come through our pre-accreditation process, and actually I hesitate because I didn't mention this, but they come through a staff review. We look through the materials, but we also conduct a legal review. So we're going to be looking at, how is our institution authorized to operate? Do they have the correct credentials to operate in their country? We want that information up front. We want to make sure that our institutions understand what's required for them in their own country, while they're, going through our accreditation process. A very important note, we never ask an institution to violate its own state or federal laws. So if your federal laws state one thing and it doesn't strictly align with our standards, we will work with you on that. And as a general rule, we never want our colleges and universities to be violating the law. Okay, so your law comes first and then our accreditation, right? And we will check on that as well. But really great question. And it's funny too, we see so much diversity in our country's legal requirements. So that does become something that one needs to navigate. A lot of the institutions that are coming to me from abroad have existed for a while. So they've been operating in their countries for a while. So adding middle states accreditation shouldn't interfere with what you're doing already, is really the response here.
Wonderful, great. I think that response really highlights the partnership and teamwork mentality at Middle States. This next question is specifically regarding hospitality labs and event spaces, but if we could maybe focus more broadly, how does Middle States evaluate the funding and infrastructure that institutions need?
Yeah, so built into our standards is criteria about physical, technological, and human resources. We want to know that our institutions have the finances and the resources to support their student success. So our evaluation teams, they go into classrooms, they look at the technology. We interview students, we interview faculty. So we want to really make sure that our colleges and universities are, at the folks at the colleges and universities are feeling supported financially. We will look at your audited financial statements. And the commission is very much interested in providing feedback about, our review of finances. But sort of broadly speaking, we want to make sure that your students are set up for success, that they have the right kinds of materials that they need so that they can graduate and get the jobs that they want and they've had the right training. And all that starts from good funding. And as I've said from the beginning, with middle states, resource allocation is always tied to strategic planning and mission. So where you're spending your money supports your strategic initiatives, your institutional priorities, and overall your mission. So part of what we do is trying to ensure that institutional resources are being spent and that services are being delivered in the correct way. Now, is that going to differ from institute? I mentioned I worked with a seminary with 20 students. We work at the State University of New York. We have schools like Princeton and Cornell. There are institutions with varying degrees of finances. It all is in service to your mission. What you do is unique to you. I've had some technical schools come on board that offer associate degrees recently, and they have to maintain, a high level of labs where they're doing automotive repair. I've been to nursing programs where they have to, have mannequins for simulation and those kinds of things, veterinary programs, medical programs. It really depends on the program you're offering, your institutional model, and your mission. But we want, again, because we have this lens that's not entirely prescriptive, we just want to make sure that the technology, the infrastructure, and the students really are there, and that it's all being supported.
Apologies for that. Okay. So the next question here is about governance. And I know that this is a huge question for our institutions. So what are some guidelines for governance and board structures for new institutions coming to Middle States?
That is a great question. I have this conversation a lot. So there are some sort of top level guidelines. And I want to preface all of this by saying, in legal matters, it often depends, right? It often depends. It depends on your unique structure, whether you're a for-profit or non-for-profit. We are looking for, in general, we are looking for autonomy at the CEO level. So whether that's the president or dean or the chancellor, whoever is serving as the chief executive officer, they are in charge of the institution and the operations of the institution, and folks report to them. We want to see autonomy at that level and then at the board level. So the board provides oversight. They will evaluate, hire, and fire the CEO, but they do not get involved in the sort of day-to-day operations of the institution. So we want to see that autonomy at multiple levels. And then for our proprietary institutions, for our for-profits, we want to make sure that there's also autonomy from the owner and that the owner is not the CEO, the owner is not controlling things day to day, and that the owner can certainly participate at the board level. But we want to make sure that there's not so much interference at each of those levels. Now, again, it's very unique to each institution. And our advice is based on a legal review that we will do. We will look at your board governance structure. And even before you submit materials, these are questions that you and we will talk about. I will have a conversation with you and we will talk about some guidelines and some things that we like to see. Our board members, for example, should not be made up of a majority of employees from the college. The board members probably shouldn't be made up of a majority of ownership either. So those are some pretty standard guidelines. With anything like this, strong policies and procedures really matter. And if your institution has strong conflict of interest policies in place, a lot of this can be mitigated. So if folks can recuse themselves from decisions, conversations, and votes that involve their own businesses or involve their own employment, then you have the right kinds of structures in place. But really, it's important to note at the top of my response is, this is really unique to each institution, and but in general, think about that autonomy, right, of the CEO, the board, and ownership as sort of a general principle or guideline.
Wonderful. So the next question is about quality indicators. So how should institutions set up quality indicators at programmatic and institutional levels? And also, what are the indicators' characteristics and how should institutions measure them?
Yeah, so this is a high level conversation about accreditation and candidacy and coming to middle states. So we didn't really get into the weeds about program level outcomes, student learning outcomes, institutional outcomes, but that is all truly baked into our standards, standards three and standard five, very importantly, currently. And when we're thinking about programmatic learning outcomes, this is a requirement of our standards that your academic programs have overarching student learning outcomes. And this is to say, every student coming out of this program will learn X, Y, and Z. And we want to see, and furthermore, we want to see that you're really evaluating that. That you're not just saying that, right? That our students are leaving here with these kinds of skills, but that you're collecting data and evidence and analyzing that evidence and drawing conclusions based on that evidence of the students meeting or failing to meet student learning outcomes. Now, those outcomes for the program level are always connected at the institutional level, our institutional learning outcomes. You might say, well, every student who graduates from XYZ university should have these characteristics. So we're going to want to see careful curriculum mapping as well, where outcomes are lined up. And we're thinking through, how do our students really meet these sort of institutional or high level goals and outcomes in a meaningful way throughout all of their academic programs. Another thing I'll mention here is our many of our institutions carry us as their primary accreditor for the entire institution, but they also have programmatic accreditors that might accredit, say, a law school within the university or a nursing program. And we work with those programmatic accreditors, and the evidences that are brought to those programmatic accreditors, they matter. Okay. I want to be really, really straight about this. If you are providing all of these materials, assessment data to your accreditor for nursing, that can be brought to us as well to show that that you are doing some student learning outcome assessment within that program. So, that those materials and that work with those programmatic accreditors is not for nothing. It's an extremely important feature. And then on the flip side, when institutions are experiencing difficulties with their programmatic accreditors, we want to know about it. And we will work with our institutions to understand what's happening and hopefully support our institutions, whether or not if they're either sunsetting a program or they need to return to good standing with their accreditor. These are things that we want to know about and we want to help support.
Thank you for that. It looks like we may be coming up on time here. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but if we could get this last question in here. Um, so the final question is about effectiveness and implementation. So how can institutions enhance the effectiveness of implementing a quality assurance system within universities to make it more beneficial?
So, enhancing the effectiveness of implementing a quality assurance system in universities to make it more beneficial. Yeah, that's the whole idea, right? So this is a quality assurance program that you would be entering into with Middle States. The idea here is once you come to us, you are meeting rigorous standards of accreditation. That quality assurance, it's reflected in your non-credit programs, in your degree programs, in your online programs. We're looking at, how well have you supported your strategic goals? We want to see institutions thinking about various strategic tactics and priorities and and measuring against those priorities to make sure that they've done well. So the whole process, whether we're looking at your mission, your governance, your academics, it's all about quality assurance and making sure that quality assurance is there. Um, and I do see a few more open questions, Krista, if we've got another minute or two.
Yes, absolutely. So this question here from the Q&A, can you please explain what you mean by USDE accreditor, and then explain what similar in scope means as well?
Okay. So yeah, that's important because not all USDE accreditation is exactly the same, but USDE accreditation from another accreditor, either what was like a historical regional accreditor, um, like NetChe or HLC or Southern States, those would be included in USDE accreditation in that category of similar in scope, as would various institutional accreditors like the ABA, the American Bar Association, or ABHAS, which accredits health sciences schools. So there's a whole list of USDE recognized accreditors that are similar scope to Middle States. So if that's a question, you have a specific accreditor in mind, I would just invite you to make sure that you contact me and we can talk about it and we can work through that together. And I will make sure that that in fact you meet you meet the requirement for expedited pathway to accreditation.
You for that. There is also another clarifying question here. So if a program is completely in a language other than English, does that mean that the evaluation team will require translation of all syllabi and other documentations that are provided as evidence?
Yeah, so we do need the valuation teams do need all documentation in English. That doesn't mean that everything, every course material, every lecture, every PowerPoint has to be in English, but it does mean that at some level, our evaluators have to look at, and I would say syllabi included, syllabi, student learning outcome assessment, and they need to see evidence that this is done. So, in order to do that, those materials would need to be translated to English in order for our evaluators to provide, a meaningful evaluation. But it certainly doesn't mean that everything at your institution has to be translated in English when our evaluators arrive, but it does mean that all the materials that the institution is submitting as evidence does need to be provided in English.
Thank you for that clarification. And then we have another USDE question here. So if an institution is already accredited by a USDE recognized accreditation body, and they want to add middle states, would they have access to self-study sessions?
Yeah, so as I was kind of explaining before, so what happens is you go through the pre-application process where we're looking just at your minimum eligibility requirements. But once you're in, once you're accredited, and then you go through that initial 4-year cycle, you're going to go through, and I think I maybe even failed to mention this, you're going to go through Self-Study Institute. So you will have a time at the beginning of year two, post accreditation. You will go through that self-study institute that I described before, which is currently conducted in a virtual platform over 5 weeks. We have staff and plenaries and all sorts of people helping you to understand the standards, navigate the evidence expectations, thinking about the logistics of preparing a visit. We really cover all sorts of different kinds of things in that institute. You also then would enjoy a self-study preparation visit. And so a vice president will come to your campus, answer any questions, look through your self-study design plan. So all of that I explained will occur for a change of accreditor institution. So you would have that support post accreditation, just like any of our institutions.
Wonderful. And then, so this question here is about international branch campuses. So, how does Middle States accreditation of an international branch campus with the main campus in the US differ from Middle States accreditation for a completely international institution?
So the answer is a little complicated, but the branch campus, they have to adhere to the laws that exist in that international location. Okay, number one. And we already mentioned that. But your branch campus is included in your scope of accreditation here with Middle States. So we will say this is the main campus. Maybe you have some other additional locations in the United States. And then you say you have a branch campus, say in Mexico or somewhere else. That branch campus is included in your accreditation process. So during our evaluation, we will want to send at least one evaluator there during the self-study process. And we will be interested in what's happening at that branch campus, just like we're interested in everything that you're doing at all your additional locations. So but the idea here is not to make it overly burdensome. So right now we visit 1/3, rounded up, of additional locations, and we do want to send an evaluator to each branch campus. So there's a check-in. There's a moment in time where we send someone, but the full evaluation is not going to be performed at the branch campus. The full self-study evaluation and the majority of all the evaluation steps in between, candidacy, pre-application, those are all going to occur at your main campus. So, number one, have to meet international law. Number two, you have to meet our standards, even if you're abroad. And we will check in on those locations. So, and again, it's typical, and we don't want to be overly burdening financially either. That's very important to our commission, is not to overly burden our institutions with additional expenses. So we'll only send, one person to the branch campus just to check in, talk to some folks, and then they can bring that message back to the team. I see that we are about time. I want to thank everybody. I can't believe the number of questions and all the even leading up to this and the number of participants that joined us today. It was really excellent to see you all. I just want to say if you're interested, you have to drive to our website. Go to Middle States, mschd.org, type in pre-applicant, applicant, candidate schools, get to our application and candidacy page. You're going to find there information about us. And importantly, you can email application process at msche.org. And that will give you a direct line to Krista and I, and we can sit down. I want to meet with each of you, anyone who's interested in Middle States accreditation. We will sit down for a virtual meeting, and I'll get you on my calendar right away. So thank you for coming today. Really appreciate you all.
Thank you, everyone.